Greetings and salutations, friends, and welcome back to the TeamIslas podcast, episode 25. My name is Doug Bush, and today I'm joined by
Patricia Islas
and
Zach Shear.
And this is the podcast for anyone looking to better themselves in percussion education, the art of the private lesson. If a lesson teacher has the opportunity to teach a student from the 6th grade through graduating high school, they will have spent more time individually teaching the student than possibly any other educator in this student's life. They will have worked with them more than any principal, any math teacher, any band director, potentially even more than their percussion directors. Because of this importance, how does a lesson teacher maximize the time with their student? Ms. Islas, how do we get the most out of our 20 minute to half hour private lesson?
Oh, there's a lot there, Mr. Bush. I would say a good place to start is communication with the percussion director / band director. Especially if you're coming into a place where you haven't taught lessons before or you're unfamiliar with the students that you're going to be teaching. Getting a read from the director of what their plan is for the semester, the month, the week for your student is going to give you a good idea of where to start with your own personal curriculum with them, or just a place to check in with the students to see if they're on the same level or more advanced or way behind, or give you some ideas of where to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, I think one thing, we've talked about this a little bit offline, but if you're the private lesson teacher and we want to make them the best use out of that 30-minute lesson, it's important to talk about the fact that it's not just one lesson, right? Mm-hmm. This is sequential. This is every week, probably for like a school year.
Yeah. So
you need to make sure, this is easy to say, easier said than done, but you need to make absolutely sure you have a way where you, the student, the percussion director or band director, and I would also argue the parent, all can see clearly if progress is being made. If not, we need to know why. If progress is being made, we need to have a way to celebrate that progress. But if we're not careful, we can fall into a trap. I've taught private lessons where I've made this mistake. We can fall into a trap of just kind of showing up once a week and giving information that's good, but is essentially random. Mm-hmm. You know, like 1 week we're working on bucks, and then the next week we come in, it's like, hey kid, how are your buzz rolls? You know, then the next week we come in and we're like, let's talk about Burton grip, you know? And it's like, okay, those are all good things. Are they at all related? Is there any sort of sequential manner to this at all? So even if the percussion director or the band director does not give you really clear direction, I would say if you want to be a great private lesson teacher, there needs to be some way. It can be very simple, but some way to make sure we are following some sort of sequential method and everybody's kind of tuned into that.
Absolutely. And, you know, for you that are teaching private lessons right now and you're looking for actionable things to apply to make your lessons better, you know, I would start by saying, that has been the majority of my career. What I have done more in my life than anything else is teach private lessons, and I've taught them in all places for all people. And so I would say this to you. You are the one that establishes the standard for your lesson. So, for example, if I'm teaching a student in the 6th grade that's coming in, I have confirmed with the director how the music stand should be set up, how the stand and the pads should be set up, what is the methodology of holding the sticks or the mallets. In some situations, the director has been like, hey, you're free to do whatever you would like. Sounds great. And others, they have very detailed thoughts on all of these things, right? So the lesson with the student, when they come in, I like to start with something personable. Usually, how was your weekend? How's this? Oh, you said you had a basketball tournament, on Thursday. How did it go? Something like that to just, as we're entering the room, right? To acknowledge that they are a human, right? And then once in the room, it's like, we're not going to start until all these things are set up correctly, right? And done well, so that I can kind of establish that this is the standard of excellence, and this is the type of environment that you are a part of, right? Because unintentionally, especially a younger student, half their lunch is on their shirt, the shoes untied, they just throw the bag on the ground, right? They're going to do whatever. They're just going to kind of, and so this is a really good moment to kind of create this mentality of like, that's not what this is, right? We're going to take some stuff, we're going to take a moment to kind of reset, let everything else, like right now, your upcoming English test doesn't matter. There's nothing you can do about it. We have like half an hour to get better in the craft of music, right? And so then with those younger students, what that usually translates into is, even though I'm holding them to the standard, the moment that they succeed at any level, I am celebrating that success, right? I am had one young man this year that was really struggling with 16th notes, like being able to understand just the different partials and play one E and versus one anda. There might have been some learning disabilities involved, who knows, right? But there was a really and we worked on it, I think for a month, and I tried every method that I have ever known or could know and could think of. I mean, at points where we're on the floor, setting out 4 drumsticks, taking 1 drumstick away, we're counting different ways, we're counting everything. And after about a month, it clicked. He was able to play, what is the solo and opening statement? Drum, eat, sleep, repeat?
Yeah.
I
think that was
right?
it. Yeah.
He's able to play the first snare solo or whatever in opening statement or in player's guide. I think it's in both. And got a 1 in his solo. And Mr. Hawkins, I remember him being like, Mr. Bush, in the entirety of my career, I don't think I've ever seen a student like the 6th grade level improve the way that this student has, right? And it's just, he needed someone not to give up on him, and he couldn't do it in class. He needed a private zone where he could continue to be challenged and pushed and learn the lesson of like, hey, how do we like not move on until we got it? And man, when he got it, he had just won the Super Bowl. You know what I mean? And Mr. Hawkins treated him like he had just won the Super Bowl. And Mr. Wynn treated him like he won the Super Bowl. And before we know it, who's the kid that's showing up to class before everybody? Who's the kid that's learning, the bell part to the Christmas music, even though he doesn't play the bells, right? You know what I mean? All those positive things happened. And oh man, those lessons are so important to establish early in the process. You have to have patience. You have to meet the student where they are, right? And at the end of the day, if the student is not getting it, that is not on the student. That's on you as the educator. You need to continue to creatively problem solve ways to get the information there.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point that you just mentioned, meeting the student where they are. Often when I see students struggle with improvement or teachers struggle with being able to reach a certain student, a big part of that struggle stems from an expectation that is maybe a little unrealistic for that individual person. There's an assumption. You've been in class for the last 3 years, just like everyone else has been in class. You've heard all the other things. You've played all the things I've asked you to play. And there should be no reason why you can't play this. It must be because of your attitude, or it must be because, I don't know, you're not practicing at home. But sometimes the student wasn't ready to hear the thing when it was demonstrated in class. Sometimes they just didn't have the technical ability to be able to manage it then. There's a lot of reasons why they couldn't do it in that setting. Maybe they didn't get enough attention and positive yes or no, whether they were doing it right. But in a situation when you're in a lesson, you can really, truly assess where the student is, what their skill set is, what they're lacking, and then not trying to associate or assign any emotional judgment towards where they are. Sometimes they're going to be deficient in things that you would assume or expect or want desperately for them to understand, and they just don't. And the second that as a teacher you accept that, then you can move forward with where they are and hopefully have an experience like you were talking about, Mr. Bush, and allowing for that student to get the focus they need on the things they're deficient on so that they can be then successful.
I hear both of you guys kind of echoing something that I experienced when I was the percussion director and you were teaching lessons to our students. You're both talking in a way that's very student-centered. And you're both talking in a way that the goal is to get the student to where they need to go. And I feel like there's an interesting balance there because yes, that's what we want. But also at the same time, part of the reason I wanted you teaching my students is because of what you offer also, right? So there was part of like this, like, do I want Doug and Patricia here because of the unique things Doug and Patricia offer? Yes. Like I kind of want the Doug and Patricia program here. But then also there's going to be some things that's like, hey, whether or not this is exactly the Doug and Patricia program, Johnny just needs this today, like it, and it's both. So sometimes when I talk with private lesson teachers or when I think about my own time teaching private lessons, there's a tendency for us to, or sometimes I hear people talk in a way where it's kind of all about them. And it's about what they think is best and what I hear phrases sometimes about like, well, what these kids really need is fill in the blank. And, there's phrases like that that focus on the teacher and what the teacher thinks the kids need. And I'm kind of like, I don't know, slow your roll, man. Like, yes, you should have some things that are maybe kind of your things or things that are in your wheelhouse. But the first priority is to evaluate what the students need. And I think that's really important, especially if you're a private lesson teacher, like you said earlier, Miss Islas, coming in and trying to fulfill what the band director or the percussion director sees as maybe a larger goal that takes all of you. It takes the band director and the percussion director and the private lesson teacher. You might be a piece of the pie, a very important piece, but it's helpful to kind of have number one, student focus first, and number two, realize that your lesson might not be the only thing getting this kid to where they need to go.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that having that communication of what the big plan is for the student can be really useful from a lesson teacher standpoint. When you have a student that maybe you're working on your own program with and they're not practicing, right? They're not putting any effort outside of your private lesson to improve on the things that you're currently working on. If instead you go to, okay, well, we have this solo contest coming up in a certain amount of weeks, or there's this band contest that you have this crash cymbal part for, this timpani part for, something that has external goals from your lesson situation with that one-on-one student, that then you can attach some organization and planning and progress to, can be a way to kind of break out of that that feeling of not really, that stagnation.
So you guys have both taught lots of lessons in your life, but also like weekly. You teach, you have, and still do teach a lot of lessons weekly. So let's say I just graduated college. I got a gig teaching lessons. I'm going to teach, 84 students every week or whatever it is at 6 different schools of all different ages, all different ability levels, different band directors. I got this guy on this side of the town who's, they're rocking trad with a tilt, and over here, they don't even have a snare line. They're just doing percussion ensemble or whatever. And very different. What's the best, simplest, most practical way, or maybe just the way you guys kind of keep track of what you're supposed to do with Johnny when you come in on a Tuesday? Like, how do you all keep track of, because you've both talked about doing things like in a sequential manner, you're not just going to rely on your memory, right? If we're going to avoid that randomness that we talked about earlier, what would your advice be, or what works for you to kind of make sure we do have a sequential path that this student is following?
Yeah, I think that there are multiple answers to this question. I think that what's important is that you as an educator, like we've talked about this in many episodes for many things, you need to give yourself time and space prior to an event to focus and think on what you want the outcome of that event to be, and then how to achieve that. And then post the event, you need to do an AAR, an after action report, where you then analyze, did the event go how I thought it would, yes or no? And what facets of what I did. I have an AAR in my phone for the all-state process, for solo and ensemble middle school, solo and ensemble high school, for drumline competition, like all this, this added to every year that I'm then hopefully I myself am improving each year when I come back to these things. And I'm trying to consciously take time before the thing happens, look at my private lesson one before I'm teaching private lesson, not like after, right? So the method that I use is fairly personal. It works for me. It might work for you. It might not. The bigger thing is like taking time to to figure out a system that you do think will work for you, and then implementing it and then seeing if it does, right? So my personal one is like, we'll use middle school students, for example. Our middle school students at Coppell play out of 2 books. They play out of the method book Super Hands for their snare drum literature, and they play out of the method book Momentum for their mallet literature. Super Hands, we tend to make it to chapter set. We tend to make it through all 7 chapters, not through all the solos, but usually through the 7 chapters and maybe 1 solo. Momentum, I think we tend on average to make it through 3-ish chapters, maybe closer to 4. And then again, these are kind of continued in high school. But so a student comes in, Super Hands, I say, okay, David, let's take a look at what you got. Let's say we're on chapter 2, the second exercise, we're doing like a timing exercise. In the lesson, we've settled on a tempo that I think is the tempo he should begin to practice. So arbitrarily we'll say 80, right? I have him then take a pencil and literally write on the page quarter note equals 80 plus 4 and have the date, right? So there's the date, there's the tempo I wanted to practice. And then I asked David, what does the plus 4 mean? And what I'm looking for him to say is, when I can play the exercise comfortably at a B+ to A- level, I increase the MET by 4, and I literally write on the page 84. I do it again, and then I write it at 88, and so on and so forth. So what happens is this cycle of when David shows up to lesson, he opens the book, and I look down, and I see it says 92. So, oh, you made it 92? And I put the MET at 92, and we play it, and I kind of let him know, like, oh, this excellent job. Maybe it's really good. Or, hey, you notice with your left, you're still this or that. Blah, 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 and we continue to move. Like, my goal usually is you can really fall in a trap of just like reviewing the things from last lesson for the whole lesson. So you have to be balanced. And like, if I see they have 3 exercises that they've been working on, I might only pick what I think this is the most vital for this student right now. Check that. Okay. And then move to the next 2 or the etude, right? And it just, like kind of like sharpening a blade, like each pass makes it sharper or better as this continues, right? That is, I would say 20% of my students do what I just said. Even though I tell them all the thing, like that actually do it to that level. Yeah, which by the way, as a listener, is a lot. I think, I get a lot more, like I open the page and the stuff is written there and, oh, Mr. Bush, I forgot to write. Okay, well, what tempo did you get to? I think I got to 108, right? Why is it important you do this? Blah, blah, blah. And so, like many of our lessons, they are universal. It doesn't matter if I'm over here with this group with trad or this other group that doesn't have a snare line. It's like we're teaching these mantras, like we've been talking about with these rules. Timing is number 1, sound is number 2. This is the right way to breathe. This is, you should play with relaxation. That are kind of like universal things. And you continue. So here, we just got an email about this. So man, I really hope you're listening to this episode. This is one of the ways to develop that positive practice culture is it's like being reinforced and I'm giving them, I'm not saying, okay, go home and practice this.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Like the next week, it's like there is a literal physical representation in their writing, right?
Yes.
If they have practiced it or not. Right?
Yeah. Go.
Oh, I was going to say, often a reason a student might not practice is because they don't understand either A, what the practice session should actually look like, or B, why it's important. And this method that you're talking about kind of kills 2 birds with 1 stone. You probably are going to have to go through this constantly through 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade. If you don't see improvement on the student practicing on their own, because you're only going to, at best, see them 3 times a month, sometimes less than that. The consistency as a lesson teacher that you have is so much less than someone that gets to see them every day. So it takes longer. But hopefully through that consistency, they start to get the hang of it. It gets through that thick skull, and they kind of understand the process at least. So eventually, once the process is there, they will start to see themselves improve and see progression in their own work, and that will give them more motivation to actually practice on their own.
Yeah, I hear both of you talking about systems that are simple, but they're specific, and there are ways you can hold the child accountable, and like, that's really all you need. Like just a tempo written in a book +4. Like you don't have to have binders and spreadsheets and algorithms. Like if you do that, that's okay. But I would only do that if it does these same things. It is specific and it is accountable. And Go ahead, Mr. Bush.
Yeah, and as long as I was going to say, that's often not the only thing written. Like when we are learning bucks, if the left taps are always like they write, and I have them do it in their own, give yourself a note that you're playing this too soft. Like write whatever you need to write. Sometimes that means they circle the dynamics. Sometimes that means they write it in. One of my favorite experiences is with this young student that just made the varsity group, incoming freshman, only incoming freshman group. She was at a lesson younger, and I asked her, I believe it was something dynamic wise. Oh, hey, it needs to do X, whatever, fill in the blank. It needs to get louder, or this or that, or maybe it was it needed to slow down. I don't remember the specific, but I could see she was kind of struggling at the moment, and I told her, hey, just write on the page, whatever will help you remember this, even if you just draw something. And she shaded from light to dark. Just these scratch marks that went from very light to really dark. They were like a clear visual representation of the musical idea. And I thought that was so brilliant, right? And it was less me telling her to word for word write down the thing I was saying, and more like, this is the concept, write it in a way where I, Mr. Bush, can see that you understand the concept that I'm telling you.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. So lesson teachers, be specific with your students, hold your students accountable. And then once you kind of have the system set up, be consistent. Because I think it's so helpful for the kid. Even your best student only has so much time to practice. And I think often we make the mistake of thinking our students should practice more when actually they just need better minutes of practice in the minutes they're spending. And that might be something as a teacher, we can help them by giving them really specific, consistent things that we are going to then hold them accountable for, so they know exactly what to practice and what we're going to expect, I know I can remember back to when I was in high school and I was trying to make the all-state band. I knew my teacher, so it was very much very execution focused, right? My teacher did what were called clam counts. It was a clam is an old school jazz term for a mistake, right? Okay. So I knew I was going to come in, Mr. Bartrug, if you're listening, I still have PTSD. I was going to come in and he was going to be like, okay, play it. Top to bottom, when we're getting really closer to the audition, right? And it was top to bottom, and he had his copy of the music. And when I was done, it was going to be 4 clams, like that, and then just fit 4 mistakes or whatever, that was a thing. And we did other things too, but I knew that was coming, and I knew to prepare for it every week, year after year, and there was no space between what I was practicing for and what he asked me to do in the lesson. I knew and he knew. Yeah. Right. But I only knew because he told me. Yeah. So that type of specific consistency is so important. And I would say maybe if you're not seeing the development you want to see in your students, it might just be because of a gap between what they're practicing and what you're asking them to do, or those expectations might be misaligned, Yeah.
Exactly. Your 4 clams version, I do that now. I don't know why it took me so long to get to this, but one of the things I've started implementing is asking the student, what grade would you give that? Because they all understand A+, B-, C, D. They deal with it as their currency in school. So, the expectation is established. They kind of understand where that is. And then whether it is a few measures of an exercise or part of an etude they're playing or part that they have for band, you can apply it to anything. Okay, what grade would you give that? Would you give that an A? Would you give that a C? And honestly, more often than not, their assessment is pretty good. And maybe even a little more harsh than I potentially would give them, especially on the younger level. But that gives it a really clear idea of okay, what effort do I need to put forward to get to that B- to that A-? And it's something that we have the luxury of doing when we're in a one-on-one setting that a teacher in a class doesn't have the time to do. We've talked about this before. But I love asking questions. As a teacher, it allows me to assess what the students know, what they don't know. If they can explain it or demonstrate it, then I know they've got it. So using that really special opportunity where it's just you and them to get them to listen to themselves and assess themselves is going to make it so much easier when they're at home by themselves to improve.
Absolutely. Okay, so here's some other really actionable things that you can do as a lesson teacher to maximize the lesson that I would say are different than when you were in a classroom setting, right? So the first one I would say is talk less and drum more, right? Yes. I know for a lot of you, your university professor just blew your mind by talking about how the gravitational pull of the moon's wavelengths during the lunar cycle affects the humanely sourced lamb wool of your $500 timpani mallets, right? But Joey is 12, and Joey does not need to know any of that. Joey didn't even show up with timpani mallets today, all right? You know what I'm trying to say, right? So there's an element of like Miss Islas said, meeting them where they are, and you cannot produce a good sound if you don't know what a good sound has. So I know that earlier in my career, I would spend so much time telling the students what I wanted it to sound like. This is what I want your bucks to sound like. So your taps, your accents, or the quality of the second note, your diddle. I do so much more time now demonstrating. And with the younger ones, I usually use, where are the aliens? Area 54? Is that where they're
Area 51.
Area 51. Yeah. I'm sorry. I don't know my aliens very well. Yeah. But I usually introduce it like that. Like, imagine that you are a scientist, right? Your job is to analyze something and dissect it, right? And Mr. Bush is an alien from another world that is brought to the planet Earth, the paradiddle, right? And here are the things I want you to pay attention, exactly how high are Mr. Bush's six, exactly how loud or his, like a scientist scrutinize every detail of it. And then I play for them. And then I will often ask them like, what did you hear? What did you notice before they even do it, right? So again, we're trying to this idea of creating an intentional thought before I actually hit the instrument, of having a goal of knowing what it is I want to achieve, while also simultaneously creating a sound bank for them of this is what a good roll sounds like. This is what a good buzz roll sounds like, right? So on and so forth. So that's something that you guys could do right now in your lessons. That's huge. Another one that works really well is, I love doing this with solo contests, all region, things like that, record them. You get out your phone and first thing in the lesson before anything, right? Okay. Oh, you have a share test over mallet, etude from Momentum. All right. I'm going to record it and then we're going to watch it together and you're going to tell me what you see. And then you record them. And I like doing that from different angles, sometimes from the front, from the side, whatever. And then as soon as it's done, they're always squirming and, oh gosh. So it's good for so many things. It gives them this chance to hey, you have to perform under pressure. We get a chance to talk about that. Did you breathe properly before you played? Did you subdivide the first couple measures before you played? And then they watch it back and I always ask them, okay, what did you see? What did you notice? And if they, I fill in the gaps I feel I need to of what they, but this isn't the whole lesson. It's one or two things and we're going to move on. On a side note, I don't know this is a big deal, but I always also make a point of, after we have watched it, I delete the video in front of the student. Mr. Bush isn't walking around with a ton of videos of middle school kids playing marimba solos on his phone, right? You know what I mean? But it is such a powerful tool. And obviously in class, though, maybe you could, during a chair test, go down the line. That's a very different experience than when I'm in class in front of everybody doing a thing, and then I get some feedback versus I'm by myself in a room, and then I myself get to watch and evaluate it.
Yeah.
With my parent hat on, Mr. Bush, I will say, I think that is a huge thing that you delete the video. I just what a great, careful, responsible, mature thing to do. I think that's a wonderful thing. All private lesson teachers do that more, do things like that more. Also, with my parent hat on and having kids of my own that have taken private lessons and things other than music now, I find myself sometimes thinking of it much more from a budget perspective and less sometimes from an educational perspective. So when you said drum more and talk less, that hit my parent wallet side, right? Because I'm yes, every minute is these minutes are actually pretty expensive from a parent point of view, right? These minutes are costing me more than the minutes in class, more than the minutes, and so you are, as a private lesson teacher, literally selling those minutes to that parent.
Yeah.
And I know, as a private lesson teacher and as a percussion director, I have seen, and I've made this mistake myself. There have been some minutes I've sold that weren't worth it. Like maybe I, whatever. Maybe we were too chit chatty, or I had to do something else, or whatever. And that's not. It's not good for the student because they're not learning. But also, your customer, to a certain extent, also is the parent.
Yep.
And the parents will start to figure out, and the percussion director will start to figure out if you're not giving an appropriate amount of value in the lesson. So I think that's just a good business practice and just a good relationship thing to keep in mind as well.
Absolutely. And so that's another actionable thing that you as a lessons teacher can do that I've found with great success over the years is that, this happened just last year. I can remember, a student, April, shows up to lesson, and April is so excited, and she loves drumming, and she hates the metronome. She refuses to use the metronome because fast is cool, right?
Yeah.
And I have told April for months now, she has to use the metronome. She refuses. Mr. Hawkins has told April, you have to use, refuses, right? So you know what Mr. Bush does? Emails April's mom.
Yes.
Yeah.
One
Yeah.
very simple email with one sentence, right? Hey, April has a big test coming up and has really been struggling repeatedly in lesson because she refuses to practice with the metronome. Will you please double check on that? I don't even get a response from the parent. I'm not really expecting one, right? Next week, April plays perfectly in time. Mr. Hawkins is like, wow, Mr. Bush, what happened? I sent a one sentence email, and you might be saying, well, hey, wasn't that Mr. Hawkins' job? Isn't that the director of percussion? It's like, no. You know how many emails Randall Wynn has to answer on a daily basis?
Yep.
I can't even comprehend. He does more emails on a day than I probably do in a month, right? Again, the simplest email of my life, boom. Because again, the parents are paying for this. They want the best thing, right? Too. And because it's kind of like what I think we said in our previous podcast, the one right before this, is just kind of, I'm not always emailing the parents. It's very rare that the only time they're getting an email from Mr. Bush is usually like an invoice, right?
Yeah.
So if the parent does get an email from me that is specifically like, hey, will you help with this? The other one I've also done is the acknowledgments of like, wow, hey, I just want to let you know, Ira's killing it in lessons right now, doing such a great job. I'm so glad that she's a part of the program, right? Both sides of that, because you don't do them very frequently, when you do them, in my experience, have been met very positively.
Yeah. And also, I'll just put my parent hat on again here. The parents don't know.
Yes.
They don't know.
Yeah.
Like, maybe April is killing it in lessons, or maybe April hasn't used her metronome in 6 months. The parents don't know.
They don't know. No.
How would they know?
No.
They're not percussionists. They don't. And I think, like you said, whether that email is negative is not the right word, but whether it's like kind of correcting or asking for help, or whether it's praise, the parents just want communication.
Yeah.
If you don't communicate with them, they are in the dark. Because I got news for you. Johnny ain't telling them what's going on in lessons. And if he does, you might be surprised what he's saying.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's not accurate. What April's telling mom, I can tell you, is not accurate.
No,
it's from the
no.
perception of a 13-year-old.
That's exactly right. That's exactly
But
right.
their opinion of you is important because
Yeah.
they're the ones who are paying you for the service.
Yes.
In most cases. And so what I would add to that, what I would like to say is your effectiveness, not only in those very expensive minutes, but in getting the parents to feel confident in their spending their precious money on the time with you, is your ability to connect with the students. I have spent a lot of time focusing on how to connect with students who are very awkward or quiet or difficult. I don't know why, but sometimes I've been given a bulk of those kids to try and navigate and deal with. So I feel like I have a special insight to that, especially being an awkward and quiet kid myself. But I think there is a very great value in finding a way to connect with someone. And there are a lot of different ways to go about doing it. It could be some common ground. Maybe you have a video game that you both enjoy or a sports ball team that is your favorite. But it can't, maybe there's too much of a spread. I mean, I'm very old, and some of these kids that I teach are very young, or probably don't have a lot of the same common interests. But one way that I have found that maybe not universally, but often will work is for me to find some quality in the students that is good. And it might not relate to their playing. Maybe their use of the metronome is outstanding. Maybe they have really good technique on a certain skill. Maybe they really love learning their scales and they know all of them. But sometimes they just don't have that going for them. And that's why they're uncomfortable. That's why they're quiet. Maybe that's why they act out. So finding something about their personality, maybe they're very intelligent, maybe they're kind of funny, maybe they are very thoughtful and aware of things. But discovering what that is in the first few lessons and then telling them that. Telling them that and finding ways and things that you play together to emphasize that skill.
Yeah.
It's going to help them be on your side and trust you early on so that they will go places that they've never been before with you.
You know, Miss Islas, you do have a superpower of breaking through with some of our more awkward students. And I think one of the reasons, I said this in the last episode too, about dealing with new coworkers, but it works so well in private lessons also. I think one of the reasons you're so good at that is because I know you do this, you ask questions. To the students. Again, like you're student focused. You're less about like, get in here and watch what Patricia has for you. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's like you ask questions, you meet them where they are. And I think you do a very good job. And this is an actionable thing for all private lesson teachers. Like ask questions. Okay, why? Well, because if they've got problems in their playing we're trying to solve, we need to find out what that problem actually is. Like, okay, the kid's rushing. Great. Okay, but the question is not so much like, are they rushing or not? I can hear that. They can hear that. But why? What misunderstanding of like foot tap or pulse or metronome, whatever, is leading to the rushing? And oftentimes they'll tell you if you just ask them.
Yeah,
And then listen, you know, and it probably makes your job way easier. You're like, oh, you think this? Like, have you ever had a kid tell you something and you're like, you think what?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
And you're like, oh, well, I can fix that.
Yeah.
Thanks for telling me.
Yeah.
But you have to ask first, especially if it's a kid who is not naturally really talkative or naturally doesn't explain themselves well. But I know, because I've seen you do this, you create a calm, safe environment in the lesson, and then you just listen to them and you ask good questions, and that can really help you help them.
Yeah.
So I think that's a very good skill to develop as a private lesson teacher as well.
And sometimes they won't talk to you. I mean, I can't tell you the number of lessons that I've walked into, especially early on, the first month or two, where I'm teaching a 6th grade boy. And they'll look at me, this 4'10" lady, and not have any idea what to do with me. And so it's like, first of all, it's a personal goal of mine to get this kid to warm up to me. But second of all, I just talk to them like we're cool. Like I already know them, and we've known each other for a while. Even when they don't necessarily respond, you'll start to see facial expressions and things. You'll start to see their body language relax a little bit. And then I know, okay, it's only a lesson or two more before they start opening up. And it's always kind of a fun little game to try and figure out what the right in is. But I absolutely never give up. That's the difference. I feel like some private lesson teachers will get with a student and they won't initially gel at the beginning. And it will kind of remain that way for the rest of the year. But through my experience over and over and over again with the thousands of lessons that I've taught, there is a moment where you can get past that. You just have to keep trying.
Amen. I love
Absolutely. Hey, if this all sounds awesome to you, but you're yelling, to the speakers right now, but I don't have a lesson studio, right? How do I develop a lesson studio? How do I get a good lesson teacher? I'd like to guide you to episode 9. Episode 9 of the TeamIslas podcast is all about how to set up a lesson studio, how to hire a teacher, going through that whole process. As always, we just want to take a moment to thank you guys for joining us today. If you have any questions about the podcast, send them to teamislas@gmail.com. That's TeamIslas, TeamIslas @gmail.com. Shout out to all the great percussion companies that support TeamIslas. That's Mapex Majestic Percussion, Dynasty Percussion and Titan Field Frames, Remo Drumheads, ProMark Sticks and Mallets, Sabian Cymbals, Beetle Percussion, and Lot Riot Apparel. What resources should you be using in your private lessons? Well, I tell you what, I would check out Super Hands. This was intentionally written to help with that difficult transition that most middle school students face, or any students face when they go from not being in marching band to being in marching band, right? I intentionally wrote this book in a very systematic, thoughtful manner where you slowly develop and reinforce skills over and over and over to help you with that big jump to often using sticks larger than you've used before, playing on surfaces with more rebound, having to wear the drums, so on and so forth. So I highly recommend checking out Super Hands. And if you're interested in like a solid mallet resource, Miss Islas wrote the book Momentum.
Yeah, Momentum was intended for a similar purpose, to build 2 mallet-specific skills with etudes and exercises and solos. And I'll tell you right now, I have a couple of 6th graders that are just on fire because of the music in the solo section of it. I mean, I was intending when I wrote these to be for high school level players or even college level players, really good, strong middle school level players. But to imagine a beginner who has no experience with piano being able to hang on one of these solos is just crazy. So it's a really great resource. It's fun music. Go check it out.
Yeah, guys. And hey, just because Miss Islas won't feel comfortable saying this, she literally received a text message this week from a director in our area who had a student that wanted to play bass drum more than anything, but the student just wanted practice. And the teacher said, okay, well, you got to be in the front ensemble and you're going to play vibes, right? And if you can prove through this audition process that you can audition well and you can do this and you can do that, then we'll consider you for bass drum. And the kid starts doing the audition process. They ask to take a mallet instrument home. They're practicing at home. And then they come into the audition, they crush it. He says, well, what do you want to play? He says, I want to play marimba. It's like, wait, I thought you wanted to play bass drum. We're doing all this play. Why do you want to play bass drum? He said, because the 2 mallet etude in our audition process was so fun to play. The music was so good. I now want to play mallets. And that was an etude from Momentum.
It was.
Right? It literally took this kid from wanting to be a bass drummer and made them want to play mallets. So it might have downgraded the kid a little now that I think about it a little bit. Mr. Shear, if you wanted to pick up either of these resources, where would you go?
You can get these at lulu.com, Steve Weiss, Dallas Percussion, any percussion retailer that you buy instruments, sticks, mallets from. And I will also say, although private lessons has been the focus of this episode, and that might be how you think of Super Hands and Momentum first as like a resource to use in private lessons, they are also the perfect book to use as the textbook for that 7th and 8th grade class if you teach that class on a daily basis.
Yeah. Again, that's what Mr. Hawkins uses for his player's guide for the 6th graders, and then Super Hands and Momentum for the 7th and 8th grade. I mean, you're not going to give them like their math book in 6th grade and have them use it for the next 3 years, are you? All right. If you show up to lesson on time and prepared, and you can play all of 7-step process by memory, then leave us a 5-star review. Remember, friends, step 1 is time, step 2 is sound, and step 3 is subscribing to the Team Islas podcast.